Welcome to Section 2 of the AWS Bootcamp course. In Section 2, we're going to take a look at fully managed SQL databases. In the previous section, we spent a lot of time looking at DynamoDB and gaining an understanding of the type of data model that works with DynamoDB. Commonly, DynamoDB is known as a NoSQL database. So we use it for storing key value pairs, for storing documents, etc. But most people, when they think about a database, they think about a SQL database, a relational database. Unfortunately, Amazon has a technology for this called RDS, and we're going to spend the majority of this section looking at RDS and its various technologies. So in this section, we're going to cover a number of things. First of all, we're going to look at an introduction to RDS and its fundamentals. Next, we'll look at how to create an RDS instance and how to connect to it. Next, after that, we're going to look at how to set up RDS subnet groups and an introduction to what they are and how to configure them, before moving on to some more advanced and more interesting topics like multi-availability zone RDS deployments, RDS backups, as well as read replicas. Each of these technologies plays an important part when considering a production deployment of a database to RDS, particularly from a scalability and resiliency point of view. Finally, we'll look at Amazon's relational database technology, something called Amazon Aurora. So let's move on to the first video. In this section, we're going to take a look at the essentials of relational databases, as well as an introduction to RDS, the Relational Database Service. So first of all, let's just recap on the fundamentals of relational databases. And we covered this very briefly in the previous video as well, in the previous section. Data is organized into one or more tables, and each of these tables is made up of one or more rows, typically many rows. In these tables, a row represents a single data point. So it's a single item, and typically it's unique within the table. A column represents a named attribute of that row. So for example, if we had a movies table, the movies table may have multiple columns. For example, movie name, movie year, director, for example. Each of those would be columns, and each row in the table would have information for each of those columns. And the most important thing, perhaps, about relational database fundamentals is that all rows within a table must adhere to the table's defined schema. And we create the schema for that table up front when the table is created, and it's quite difficult, actually, to modify that schema later on. So each data point that we enter into the table must adhere to that schema. And here's an example of what a relational database table might look like with a training course information schema. And we have course ID, course name, location, and cost as fields on that table. And then we have 4 rows for drawing, public speaking, photography, and painting. So most people are probably already familiar with this. So let's move on to RDS specific information. So what is RDS? Amazon RDS, or Relational Database Service, is Amazon's managed relational database service in the cloud. In terms of benefits, it allows you to very easily deploy highly scalable, highly available, durable, easy to administer, fast and secure databases on the Amazon AWS platform. And in the next video, we're going to see just how easy RDS makes it for us to deploy databases with a production grade level of resiliency with a very small number of clicks. And there's a huge number of use cases for this. Almost every application developed in the past 20 years uses some kind of database, and the majority of these use a relational database. So I don't think we need to talk too much about use cases and importance for relational databases. In terms of product offerings, there are 6 databases that you currently deploy, or 6 database engines that can currently be deployed to Amazon RDS. And they're Amazon Aurora, which is Amazon's specific offering based on MySQL. There's MySQL, which is the world's most popular open source database. There's MariaDB, which is also a variant of MySQL. There's Oracle, the Oracle database platform, which is very well known. There's SQL Server from Microsoft, and also Postgres, which is another open source database. And an important thing to note here, you can actually purchase licenses for SQL Server and Oracle via the RDS console on either a pay-per-use basis, or you can supply your own license, for example if you're migrating from an on-premise installation. So RDS is a fully managed service, which means there's no requirement for the user to manage an operating system. In fact, Amazon goes a step further than this. There is no access to the underlying operating system, and that's a really, really important point. Amazon offers RDS databases as a service, which means you can access the JDBC endpoint or ODBC endpoint of your chosen database engine. You can view performance metrics and specs and that kind of thing on the AWS console, but there's no access to the underlying operating system. However, of course, you can provision and resize resources, for example, increasing the amount of storage space available to your database, or increasing the instance size pretty much on demand. But predominantly, all you're provided with is an endpoint, which you connect to using a standard database connection tool, and we're going to see how to do that in the next section. RDS uses EBS volumes for both the database and for log storage. Now recall from our previous section, EBS volumes, that's elastic block storage, are network-mounted block storage volumes. So it's very similar to how you've probably installed a database on-premise. The backing store is actually a SAN over the network. And you have three types of storage, exactly as you do with Amazon EC2. You have general purpose SSD, which is mostly suitable for most workloads with moderate I/O requirements. You have provisioned IOPS, that's provisioned input-output SSD, and that's much more suitable for high-performance workloads, especially where you require consistent performance. So Amazon allows you to specify the number of IOPS you want to provision on your EBS volume ahead of time. And then you have magnetic, which of course is the cheapest per gigabyte, but also by far the lowest performance. And really this is only suitable for small databases with infrequently accessed data, and is not really recommended for most production applications. Another nice thing about Amazon RDS is it includes automatic updating. So you can specify a maintenance window for your database, and Amazon will automatically install minor upgrades to the database engine for you. The storage capacity for your database can also be increased while maintaining the database's availability. So this means you can dynamically add storage to your Amazon RDS instance without taking the database down. However, in order to increase your compute resources, your RDS instance's compute resources, your database instance does become temporarily unavailable, while the DB instances class is modified. Now, and again, a nice thing is you can either specify if you want to make this change immediately, or you can specify to schedule it within an optional maintenance window. And this is the default option. So if you make a change that requires your database to go down or become unavailable, Amazon will schedule it for the next scheduled database maintenance window. So that's everything I wanted to cover in this video.